Hello, Romantics. I'm Sarah Gomez, author, romance lover, and host. You're listening to Romancing the Story, a podcast centered around writing, reading, and story structure, all with a twist of romance. We're at episode 49, and on today's episode, I chat with co-host of the Author Wheel podcast and fantasy author Megan Haskell about humble beginnings and overcoming struggles as a writer. We discuss the growing catalog of resources the Author Wheel continues to share with the writing community. Megan mentions the Kickstarter for their latest quick guides, a collection of writing reference guides with approachable hacks to improve your writing and methods to find a solution right away. If you're interested, links to connect to the Author Wheel, their Kickstarter, and other mentions will be listed in the description. I do use some affiliate links, so if you buy through the link, it helps the podcast and is always appreciated. With that said, let's jump right in. Welcome, fantasy author and co-host of the Author Wheel podcast, Megan Haskell. Yay! I'm so glad you were able to join the podcast, and I'm so excited to kind of talk to another podcaster who also understands my struggles as a podcast.
Yes, that has actually been one of the biggest benefits of running the podcast is talking to other people who are doing some of the same things that we're doing and trying to learn from that and do better and grow and all of those things. So it's wonderful.
It is. So in case listeners don't know, can you tell them a little bit about yourself and your writing?
Absolutely. So I am a portal fantasy adventure author. My tagline is I like to pen tales of myth, magic, and mayhem. So Megan, myth, magic, and mayhem is the alliteration of the M. I love it. Anyhow, easy to remember. So I have my main series is the Senyari Chronicles. And the first book in that series actually was a reader's favorite Bronze Award winner. So I am an award-winning author. And there's 5 books in that series. And then I have a new series with the second book coming out in probably June. That's a more contemporary fantasy adventure. She's a bartender who can see the demon on your shoulder. So those are fun. So that's my fantasy side. And then on the nonfiction side, I am co-founder and co-host of the Author Wheel, which is a website and podcast dedicated to helping writers keep their stories rolling. So we actually started out with books. My partner, Greta, is a traditionally published author, or started out as a traditionally published author, and I have always been indie. So together we wrote Publish, Take Charge of Your Author Career, which is sort of the overview, how to even make the decision, first of all, of whether you want to go traditional or indie, and then what are the steps you need to go through to get there. So we started out with that one, and we have a course that goes along with that. And then now we are launching a Kickstarter for our 3, what we call quick guides, which we're turning into an omnibus paperback. So one is on productive writing habits. The second one is understanding your genre. And the third one is planning a novel, which is all the creative brainstorming, pre-planning kind of work that you have to do before you start actually writing. And then we're adding on a special Kickstarter exclusive section, which is the author strategy guide. And so we're combining all that into one omnibus and creating courses for each section to help writers, again, find if they have a problem and you can identify the problem. We want to help you target that and take actionable steps, one step at a time, chunks, so that you can actually move forward right away.
That's a lot to take it. You have so much going on. That's so impressive. You and Greta just seem to really have a great idea and really have all these great little branches going off to kind of help you with these ideas for authors, which is so cool. And I didn't even notice the Author Wheel was to keep your stories rolling.
Yeah, sometimes we've been accused of being a little too clever with it. People don't get it, but yeah, it's the Author Wheel, keep stories rolling. We started our first publish, actually the first version of the book Publish was actually called Aspiring to Author, but people were they didn't the title didn't work. They didn't, it's I don't know what that means. That's weird. Okay, never mind. Publish is in your face. We're having to learn how to be just put it out there. But yes, the Author Wheel, keep your stories rolling.
And since you're like the co-host and this brand really kind of focuses on like writing craft careers and author and publishing. And it's more than just a podcast, kind of like you mentioned, there's all these resources you guys offer. You and Greta, the other co-host, have expanded the brand to include like the community, the online courses, and like you said, the writing guides, which has been the most recent thing.
Yeah.
So how did the idea come about to build an entire catalog of author resources?
Honestly, it came out of our own struggles. So our history is that Greta and I originally met at a writers' conference. And we both had novels that were pretty much ready to be pitched or published at around the same time. And then we joined a local writing group together too. So we kind of became friends through this process. And as our books were going through the two different stages. So again, she went traditional. So she was pitching agents and editors and all those things. Whereas I was learning all the steps that needed to go into self-publishing. And as I say, like indie publishing, because it's, I was hiring cover designers and I was hiring editors and I was doing all of that stuff too. So as we kind of walked our two separate paths, we kept talking and we realized there are a lot of similarities in the steps and in the process and in the challenges that we had, as well as differences. But that was a unique perspective, because most of the time when you go online to look for writing advice, it's like the one person has the one idea that worked for him or her that, now they say is the way to do the thing. But we believe there's no right way to write, produce, or publish your book. It's just what works for you, for your goals, for your process, and the things that you want to do. That was the genesis of the published book. And it was also in part because we wanted to go back to that writing conference and we didn't want to have to pay the admission fee. So we pitched the course and we're like, yeah, this is our two perspectives on how you do this. Because we were at that point, both actually published. And so that was where it all began. And then as time progressed, as we faced all of these different challenges and each had our own struggles and things that we had to deal with, we realized these are all tips and tools and tricks that could be helpful to all writers. Everybody's going to have problems at different stages in their writing career, whether that's initially just trying to find the time to write, whether that's understanding the marketplace and where your book fits into it and how to use genre tropes to make your story better. We actually, in the future, we're going to do one that's actually on plotting, so we have all these ideas, all these things that we've had to learn and use to overcome our own struggles. We wanted to share with the writing community as a whole. And so we've just kind of kept at it one step at a time, one new thing at a time, one new project at a time, until now we've got a pretty good catalog.
Well, and I like that you take into consideration the like kind of the ever evolving thing of like one way isn't just the right way. It's like you can go about it in any way, because that's kind of how I approach things. And I kind of encourage other writers or authors. And I've had so many other like guests tell me, there's different ways to do things. And it just depends on where you are in your stage of life, where you are in your writing. And it just like, and no two stories will have the same method. Yeah.
Even the same writer, one book, the way you write one book, even in the same series, could be totally different from how you write the next one, because you learn from that first one, or something happens in your personal life that changes your working situation, or all those other things, right? So yeah, it is constantly evolving, constantly changing. And I know for me, if you do the Clifton strengths, my number one is learner. So for me, learning and finding those new tips and tricks and habits and trying to improve my process and trying to become more efficient and trying to do more with the time that I have is a huge part of who I am as a writer, and part of what keeps this job so interesting, because you're constantly having to learn in order to keep going.
I love authors, in particular writers of any sort, because I feel like they're always trying to learn. It's like, how can I write this book better? Or what is a good method I can use to help like streamline my writing? Yep. So, and that's why I do really enjoy being like specifically in the kind of like writing subset of like podcasts and talking to people about it.
And
Mhm.
what have you found has like been one of your most popular resource offerings?
So I think the easiest one to grasp, quite honestly, like from a marketing, from our side marketing to readers, is the productivity, or excuse me, to writers, because we market to writers, we who are our readers. But anyway, so the productivity one I think is always a good fit. Again, my background, I didn't start writing until I was an adult. I started writing on my commute to work on the train. And then I took it seriously, and I actually came up with the first idea that became the Senyari Chronicles 3 months after I'd had my first daughter. And so I had quit my job to be a stay-at-home mom, had this idea, started working on it, published that first book 3 weeks before my second daughter was born. So my whole genesis as a writer was finding those moments in time when I could write, when I could make it work. I'd find 5 minutes here, 5 minutes there. I'd write, well, literally, like when she was a baby, I'd have her in the carrier thing on the front, and I would be standing at the kitchen island, and I'd typing as I bounced her back and forth so that I could get some writing time in, because otherwise it wasn't going to happen. And so I think there are a lot of, especially new writers, who struggle with those issues, who are like, I really want to write, but I have a day job and I have kids and I have family responsibilities. I don't have time for this. And it's like, no, you do. Maybe not as much as you'd like, maybe not in the way that you'd like, but there are moments of time that you can use. And so I think that productivity book is an easy grasp for a lot of people. But that being said, the understanding your genre and planning a novel quick guides, I think, are actually more important. And I'm really trying to encourage writers, new writers especially, or those transitional writers who are trying to go from hobbyist to professional or career. Those two books are so critical to crafting a story that will sell. And I'm not saying writing to market, because I don't go from the process of like looking at the market and saying, oh, this genre, this subgenre is super hot right now. This trope is super hot right now. So I'm going to write that. That's not what I do. But I take my idea and I say, okay, how can I make this better so that readers will understand what I'm trying to tell them, the story that I'm trying to tell. And so that they will find it and go, oh yeah, I want to read that because that has the things that I love in it. And so it's taking the idea and making it more approachable, and planning for it as an author, planning for the series, planning for the world building, making sure that you understand the foundation. And that's why this Kickstarter is called Foundations of Great Storytelling, because it's the foundation that you need to build and have prepared so that your story has the ability to stand up on its own and really, somebody wants to go live there in that story world. And so that's what we're trying to do. So yeah, so that's my pitch.
Well, and I appreciate that so much, because I love like writing reference guides where I can go back to them and like find something new. Like,
Yeah.
even if I've read it once before, like I could go back 6 months later and I'm, like you said, different stage of life. Like I recently became a foster mom this year. So
Congratulations.
thank you. So like my life has kind of been, all those little productivity times have kind of siphoned down quite a bit. And then I have to find those pockets. But like I could go back to those reference guides and find like, oh, you know what? This is a new method I could definitely try. Or I can go back to that, as opposed it's more evergreen, as opposed to some of the other ones that are kind of in the now, kind of, you were talking about, this is my hot genre right now, but then that might change anywhere from 6 to 9 months. So
right. Exactly. And that was why we wrote them originally as quick guides, because we wanted these things to be every chapter, every section of the book, we wanted it to be actionable and something you could implement today. It's something that would be evergreen, that you could always go back to and be like, okay, I need some new productivity hack because my life has changed in this way. What can I do? Here, let's go back through this book. Oh yeah, this chapter was all about, the tips and tricks that to get more out of every minute, or how to write faster, or those things. And we wanted that to be something that would be very approachable and not feel overwhelming, right? We're trying to cut through that overwhelm that because if you go on Google, you're going to get 500,000 different tips and you can get big, long books on how to write, faster and all these things. But it's so hard. It's like, I don't have time to take a 6-hour class on how to write faster. I need to be using that 6 hours to write, Exactly. And so that's what we were trying to do with the quick guides. And that's why we're now putting that in the omnibus as, again, individual sections, so that each section you can go back and just find the thing that you need right now.
That's awesome. And when you're presenting all this great insight, like to writers and readers, does that experience come from your personal background or Greta's personal background, or is it kind of like from stuff you've heard from other experts as well?
Yes.
To everything, all of the above.
Everything,
okay.
All of the above. Yeah. No, I mean, yes, it does. So Greta is a little bit older than I am. She's at a different stage in her life. So her kids are all grown. She started writing fiction after her kids left the house, or maybe at the end, when they were still in high school, and she started writing novels. I can't quite remember the timeline. But she had always been she'd done magazine writing before that. She had started out, her very first book was a fitness book called The Wine and Chocolate Workout. And because she was a fitness professional at the time. And so she had all these little handouts that she would give to her clients, and they said they wanted a book. And so she wrote it. And that was the very first book she wrote. I don't think it's available for sale anymore, just as an FYI. But so she has a very different background than I have. Together, we have a lot of experience, and we talk about that and discuss that on the podcast, and how, each of us have different challenges and have faced different challenges over the course of our careers, and how we've overcome that. But we've also read a lot. We read a lot of books, from other industry experts. We have a lot of experts on our podcast, people who are much smarter than us or more knowledgeable than us about specific topics. So Greta and I like to call ourselves the overview girls, because we have this breadth of knowledge. And we can point you in the right direction. We know what resources we trust, the people that we've relied on for information about a specific topic. So we're going to give you the basis, again, the foundation that you need, so that you can start to ask the right questions, because a lot of times you don't even know what questions to ask when you're first starting out. So if you can ask the right questions, then we can point you in the direction of those deeper dive experts that have like the really detailed knowledge and experience into specific, for example, ad platforms. Or if you're going wide, I know who to tell you to go learn about going wide and get you all the information you need. I can give you the basics. She's going to get you the in detail down to like the metadata and the things that you should be thinking about to really optimize your business. Right. So yeah, it's a combination of all those things. And we like to think we're curators. We're helping you figure out what you need to know, giving you the first steps in that. And then once you decide that you want to go farther with it, we know who to tell you to go to.
That's awesome. And so with the Kickstarter too, you had mentioned like it's called the Foundations of Great Storytelling, right? And like you have the 3 writing guides that provide like planning and preparation in your writing journey. The writing guides include productivity writing habits, understanding your genre, and planning your novel. How did you and Greta decide these topics should be the foundations of great storytelling?
Because there are so many books out there on plotting. Right? There are so many books out there on the craft of creating the story itself, the plot, or creating great characters. And we touch on these things a little bit, but there are so many great resources out there. We didn't want to be reinventing the wheel. Instead, we were trying to find the topics that we felt were underrepresented, and that especially those, again, transitional writers that are going from hobbyist or just starting out, trying to like just learn the basics and get a feel for writing, to becoming professional, what I call professional or career authors who want to produce a series or a multiple books, right? when you're going through that stage, you don't necessarily know yet anything about genre. There's a great story that we tell about Greta, where she went to go pitch her first book to agents. And they came back and said, well, what genre is this? And she goes, well, it's a thriller. They go, no, it reads like a romance and a women's fiction. And yeah, there are some thriller elements, but you're not hitting that target. So she went back, she wrote a different book, went back to another agent later with the second book. And again, they asked, well, what genre is this? And she said, cozy horror. and the agent just had that reaction, just started laughing. And she's like, there's no such thing. And of course, this is, now 5 or 6 years ago or 7 years ago or however long. There's no such thing as cozy horror, right? Actually, side note, there is now on Amazon. There is a subgenre, or somebody started marketing. I'm sure
someone started it.
Yeah, someone started marketing their book as cozy horror. So it does now exist somewhere, somehow. But from a traditional publishing marketing perspective, there is no such thing as cozy horror. That just seems kind of silly. But she thought she was being unique and creative. And the reality was that she needed to understand her genre, understand what she was writing so that she could tell the story that she wanted to tell in a way, again, that would sell. That agents and editors could take to publishers and say, this is what this story is. And because it has to be kind of high concept, it has to be easy to explain. Most new writers don't realize that.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why we wrote the Understanding Your Genre book, because it was like, okay, these are the basics, the things you need to know. This is how you need to go about researching your genre and understanding what's really important, what readers are looking for, what are the tropes that they're looking for, what are the things that you enjoy as a writer writing, and then how do you approach that to the reader? And so it is a foundational before you ever start writing the book, because you do not want, and I've done this, right? You do not want to have to go back and be like, oh, this is supposed to be fantasy romance, and the romance is really not there. Okay, so now you got to go back and revise, or, change the whole book, or it just doesn't sell if you're going indie and you publish it that way. So understanding these things before you start writing and creating that foundation for success will set you up for a better book and for a more marketable book down the road.
So important as someone who is in marketing, because we were chit-chatting before this, and I was kind of telling you my background as as a marketer who works in the entertainment industry with video games, how important those things are is knowing your genre and how to pitch it to possible fans, right? Or followers or your audience, so that they know what they're getting into.
Absolutely. And it takes time. I don't want to make anybody think that, this is something you can just learn and do overnight. You can learn the basics and you can start practicing it. But for myself, I've found that it wasn't until I started doing live book events where I had to sell in person that I was really able to refine and define my pitch for my series and my books.
Yes.
And, and understanding that one line thing, it takes practice, right? Mm-hmm. But we're going to get you started. We're going to get you on the right path so that you have that understanding, so that you know what you're trying to do as you get going.
I love that you guys can provide that kind of boilerplate kind of, format to where you can really siphon down and figure out what your story is about and how to maybe in one sentence, right? Figure out exactly what genre it is. Would I pitch it to anybody who's a fan, a follower, or even a publishing agent and or publisher? And the campaign also has an exclusive guide called the Author Strategy Guide, which sounds amazing and kind of goes hand in hand with what you were talking about. I haven't seen too many guides built around author strategy specifically. Yeah. Why do you think it's so important for authors to have a strategy?
So this is actually very new. Over the Christmas holiday. So I had been reading a book, not geared towards authors, but on strategy. And of course, now I'm not remembering the name. I'll have to go find it at some point. But I was reading this book on how to develop strategy, the difference between strategy and tactics, right? And so over the Christmas holiday, which I always use as kind of a time to refresh and rethink and assess what I'm doing and why I'm doing it, and why am I doing purpose. But so I always use that time to kind of clarify my purpose. And so I came up with this system, I guess, where you start with, what are your strengths? What are your weaknesses? What are your goals? What are you trying to do? And then how do you distill that down into a strategy that works for you as an author, that fits your goals and your needs and the lifestyle that you want to lead? And then the tactics that will ultimately help reach that strategy or get to that strategy. And I found it was so like having that now as I actually have a little bullet journal that I use, having that written out and in my hands that I can constantly go back and refer to it. And it's not long and it's not super detailed, but it's the guidepost, right? It keeps me on my path, not somebody else's path, on my path, to make sure that I'm doing the things that I want to do and that everything I'm doing is moving me toward that goal. And I think that's missing for a lot of authors. I think a lot of authors see the tactic that's working for somebody else, right? They see the rapid release tactic, where they're writing a book a month and they try to go after that tactic, that strategy. But what they aren't realizing is that person doesn't have kids, or their kids are grown and they can just spend all day writing, and they have already been writing for 30 years. So they're really fast already. And so that person has all these other things that make that work for them. Whereas for me, that doesn't work. I've got kids. I have, 2 businesses basically, with the fiction and the nonfiction. I'm not a super fast writer. I tend to be a pantser and not a plotter, which makes things more challenging on the speed front. And so I have all these other things, but I have other strengths, other abilities that writer might not have. I am not the primary income for my family. So I don't have to worry as much about, always hitting that monthly income to pay my rent, right? So that gives me a little bit more flexibility to have the lifestyle that I want. I still have to make an income. I'm still being, have goals to be successful and make my business better. But that 6-figure author is not as critical for me at this moment in time. And so understanding those differences and creating the strategy that works for you and what you want to do and how you want to live your life and what your goals are is going to keep you sane. It's going to keep you from being burned out. It's going to keep you from ultimately quitting because you get tired of it. It stops being fun. Because I think we all start out writing because it's fun. We want to tell stories. And so that's why strategy is so incredibly important. And it's so unique to each person and what they're trying to do, that just following what's working, you're going to find yourself going down paths that make you unhappy, that don't fulfill you.
Exactly. Oh my gosh. That is such an important piece to it, because I've heard, like, just from other experts and presenters who have worked with authors and writers for a very, very long time, say that, about 50% of it's writing. The other 50% of it is knowing how to market yourself or brand yourself and making sure your story gets into the hands of the readers you want them to. Right. And there has to be some type of strategy there for yourself for writing and your career and marketing, or else you kind of like I am trying to figure out my strategy now, because I'm just kind of floundering, because I know if I don't set a deadline or try to work in those times and really strategize it, it'll just kind of go out into the ether, right? And just continue on. So like, what kind of strategies are introduced in the guide? Is it like marketing? Is it career path? Is it writing sustainably? All of the above?
It's not so much marketing, to be totally honest. We're kind of focusing again on this like planning stage, on the foundation, the pre-writing stage. So the strategy is more about understanding yourself. It's analyzing your strengths and weaknesses, what you can do, what you can't do, what you want to do. And then creating a more of a production schedule and a overarching philosophy for your writing career. So are you going to go after the rapid release strategy, or are you going to be a slow writer who goes wide and does Kickstarters and has more big events, right? Are you going to focus on, how are you going to focus your genre? So one of the first things we do is actually walk you through how to create a tagline for your career, not for your books, mind you, for you as an author. It's an author mission statement and an author tagline. And that's why mine is Myth, Magic, and Mayhem, because those are the elements that, well, actually it's the full tagline. It's escape into Myth, Magic, and Mayhem. Because I write portal fantasy, that's the escape. I want to give the readers an escape. I like to use it as an escape into another world. So it's escape. All my stories are based on mythological tropes, ancient myths, and I twist them to make them unique for myself. Magic, fantasy, they all have magic. I mean, that's just kind of goes with the genre, right? And mayhem, they're action adventure type stories, more than the big epic political sagas, right? So that's my tagline. And I use that to guide what I'm going to write, how I'm going to write it, when I'm going to release, what my production schedule is going to be, what my goals are for the year. But again, more on that sustainable author career, less on like marketing type stuff, with the exception of understanding that genre has tropes and you need to use those tropes to market your book to your readers. So that's important, but not the actual, how do you reach the reader? Not yet. That's down the road.
I like that. I like though that you're kind of figuring that portion of it out, because I think once you figure that out, it becomes easier, right? Mm-hmm. To figure out the rest of those pieces. Yeah. So what is there a key strategy you can share?
Well, I mean, I think that the key strategy is it's not even the strategy itself, because we're not telling you how to strategize. We're telling you to assess yourself and create a strategy that works for you. So I don't have necessarily like use this strategy or use that strategy, or, you know, this does this or this does that. Because so much of it is so personal. But what we do is coming back to the strengths and weaknesses. So like for myself, one of my strengths is that I am a very detailed world builder. Readers have come back to me over and over and said, the world building of my stories is fantastic. So that is a strength. So I know that. So I try to make sure that all my books have strong world building and that I spend time developing that world, because I want to make sure that my readers, my fans, always get that strong world building in all of my stories. So I analyze my work for that. And that's one of my strengths. So my strategy is to write fantasy books that have strong world building and include that in my process. So it's more like that. So, and a weakness of mine is that I'm not a fast writer. So I have to, as part of my strategy, make sure that I block out at least 2 Pomodoros of writing time every single day, so that I'm constantly making forward progress. And actually the Pomodoros are a tactic, not a strategy, but the strategy is blocking out time and setting aside time, making sure that I prioritize that block of time, that writing time, so that I am constantly every day making forward progress. And maybe I'm not writing 5,000 words a day or 10,000 words a day like some of the rapid release authors, but that's okay. That's not my strength. My strength is constant, steady, incremental progress. And so I make sure that I build that into my work process. So if that makes sense. So that's the kind of things that we're talking about. It's like, you have to think about what you do well, do more of that. And then think about what you don't do well and either try to hire it out to someone else if you can, or try to find ways to overcome that weakness.
I see. Yeah, because I could see that, because one of my strengths, and I'm kind of learning to work within that time frame, is I get everything done in the morning really well. Like I will hit it hard in the morning and the early afternoon, and I will get so much productivity done. But then come around like mid-afternoon to the evening, I'm kind of toast. So like, I think those are like like you said, that's kind of like key strategy things to know about yourself.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So your strategy would be to make sure that you set aside that morning time. Don't let anything interrupt that morning time, because that's your best time for writing. And then do your marketing stuff in the afternoon, or do your doctor's appointments, your life stuff in the afternoon that doesn't require as much creative processing power. So that's part of the strategy. I have another friend who writes best at night. So he starts writing after his kids go to bed at like 8, and he'll write till 2:00 in the morning. And he loves it. It works for him. It's great. I could never do that.
No kidding.
But that's another piece of that strategy. So finding and prioritizing and protecting that writing time as a piece of your overall writing career or goals.
I recently talked to our mutual friend, Jennifer Hilt, on the podcast about the romance trope thesaurus, and her guide was primarily built for romance writers. Yeah. But it could apply to writers in any genre and at any stage. So is the writing guides designed for writers kind of in different stages of their writing career or in different genres?
Absolutely. Yes. And again, it goes back to Greta's and my philosophy and why we are co-founders of this, why we both do this, because she's a thriller author. I'm a fantasy author, right? And we found the similarities between not the genres, but in the process and in the things that you have to think about and do and plan for. So even the Planning a Novel guide, which has an entire section on world building, we realized, like, yeah, for fantasy, it's obvious that you need to do world building because there's things that don't exist in our world that you have to think about and plan for and create and whatever. What's maybe less obvious, but still just as important, is that thriller authors need to do that too. And romance authors, like if you're writing small town romance, you need to know what that small town looks like. You need to know what it feels like. You might have to draw a map of the town, right? Like people think about maps in fantasy all the time because of Tolkien, and you see these big world maps and all that. But in a small town romance, if you can create a map of the town or artwork for the town of the buildings up there, oh my gosh, that makes it so much more real for your readers versus just having these characters kind of moving around this blank space and like, oh, they walk down Main Street. Well, what does Main Street look like? Do you know? Because if you don't know, your readers aren't going to know either. So it is absolutely true that it's for it. Our intention is that these guides are for any genre, and they're tips and tools that any writer at any stage can go back to. If you have an issue that you're struggling with, and again, for this particular case, it's all the pre-writing stuff. So that's what we have available. We're getting to the other stuff down the road. We've got plans. We got big plans, lots of plans all the time. But for now, it's this pre-writing stage. So if you have a problem, if you're facing an obstacle because you just took on a foster kid and now your schedule's completely changed and you have to rethink how you work, the productivity guide is going to have things that you can find useful and ideas that you can incorporate into your process. And the same thing with understanding your genre. If you don't know how to do research on what your genre is or what it looks like, or what your readers want, we have a process for you to go through so that you can figure that out. And if you're starting a new series that's a new genre, guess what? You have to go back and do this stuff again. This is a good reminder. If you're thinking about crossing genres or combining, two genres, doing a mashup, guess what? You have to do this again, right? You have to understand this stuff. So it's always a good reference to go back to. So anytime you have an obstacle, you want to find the solution, and that's what we're trying to be.
Since you have plans like later on, this is mostly like pre-planning, like you said, and strategy for like getting kind of started with a novel or a series, starting that beginning writing process, and you have more plans later. Can someone like another writer who's like somewhere different in the process as of right now, like today, can they go back and reference maybe the podcast, or is there an email list you guys happen to have that will tell you plans later of those guides later down the road?
Absolutely. Of course. Yes. So the authorwheel.com, we actually, We haven't been using it so much for instructional purposes in the past since we launched the podcast, really. But if you go back in the archive on our website, on the blog, we actually have entire articles on plotting your novel using the 3-act structure, on developing characters using the Enneagram. So we have all this information available on the website at authorwheel.com. While you're there, if you go to authorwheel.com/stuff, because we're so creative. If you go to /stuff, we have our downloads that are currently available for subscribers. So all of them, if you download them, it is a subscription to our mailing list. And so the ones we have up there now, we have a 7 days to your author brand mini email course, which was a feeder into the Kickstarter, but we actually think we're going to just keep it up there kind of forever because people have really enjoyed it. It helps you distill or create an author mission statement and distill that down into a tagline. So it's kind of the first step of the author strategy overall guide. So that's available up there now. We also have the top 5 roadblocks that writers must overcome download worksheet. So we talk about what those roadblocks are that we found that have been the most common, ways to overcome that. And then we give you space to journal and come up with your own solutions for your roadblocks on those, how you're going to not have those problems. Learn from our mistakes. And then we have an overview of the author strategy worksheet that I created in December. So it's not the full guide. It's not all the explanations, but it walks you through some of the basic steps that we went through. Because I did it for me, for my fiction. And then I showed it to Greta. And so then she did it for her fiction. And then we did it for the author wheel as a whole. And it worked really, really well. So we're going to go into more detail with that in the actual book, but that's one of our downloads that will be the what we call our action plan worksheets that will be included in that as well. So those are some of the free downloads you can go to get more information and sign up. And then if you're on our list, obviously, yes, you will get continued forward information as we come out with new courses, new quick guides, new projects and things in the future.
So where can listeners find these writing guides and your podcast, and how can they connect with you?
Absolutely. So the podcast, it's the Author Wheel podcast. It's available on whatever podcast platform you like to listen to. So just go search that, as my daughter would say, search it up. Authorwheel.com is our main website where, like I said, if authorwheel.com/stuff gets you all our available downloads for the moment. And that's where you sign up for our newsletter. And I should also mention too, that the newsletter, every week when we release a new podcast episode, the newsletter comes out with our takeaways from that episode. So Greta and I interview, another expert. And then in the email, we say what our favorite things were, what we learned, what our kind of takeaways from that. So that's been a pretty good draw for a lot of writers as well. They enjoy that. So check that out. And then on the personal side, my website is meganhaskell.com, and I sell all my books are both direct. You can go to my website and buy them there, and wide. So you can buy them on whatever platform you like.
Thanks so much to Megan for joining the show. If you like this kind of content, don't forget to subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. That way you're the first to hear new episodes when they drop. And if you get a chance, feel free to leave a review. It helps support the show and allows more opportunity to bring in all kinds of fantastic guests. There's also a link to the YouTube channel in the description if you'd like to see the interviews with some of the guests and see them show off their lovely books. No book recommendations for this episode, but if you get a chance, be sure to check out the Kickstarter that I have linked in the description for the Author Wheel and their Foundations of Great Storytelling. As always, stay safe, be well, and keep writing. Bye!